I am so excited to kick off our fall 2024 webinar series. Courtney and Gina have a great presentation prepared for you all today, and I will let them take it away and introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm hoping that you can still see my screen. Perfect. I have to also get back to it. I'm Courtney Shareef. I serve as Strategic Research Initiatives Librarian here at U of L, and I'll let Gina also introduce herself.
Hello, and my name is Gina Genova, and I work as a clinical librarian at the University of Louisville's Health Sciences Library.
And we are both considered early career librarians, and so as part of this session, we'll share a little bit about our journeys and what the early career librarian experience encompasses. And so I'll get us started. Um, I began pursuing my master's in library and information science in spring of 2020 at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I graduated in May 2022 and started looking for positions that summer. I applied to U of L in about August, around August of that year, was interviewed in October, received an offer in November, and then started the role that I'm currently in January 2023. So I have a little over a year and a half's experience. I'll kind of talk through my experience while pursuing my master's and some of my early career. But what I ultimately want you to really come away feeling is that everyone's journey, everyone's job search, everyone's early career experience is different. But there are some things that maybe you want to keep in mind. So, over the course of my master's, I shifted my focus a few times. I went into the program intending to be a librarian and an archivist. I was working remotely from Louisville for a company that's headquartered in Chicago called the History Makers. It's an independent digital archive. I still have a passion for special collections and for, collecting the stories of people who are often missing from the historical record. And I started out in that first two semesters of the program, really taking a lot of courses geared toward archives. But we also all know that 2020, the world changed for a lot of us. And shortly thereafter, I also really decided to grow roots here in Louisville. We purchased a home, we started a family. Um, and so even though I wasn't about to graduate, I did start looking at job postings in the area. And what I was finding is that there were not a lot of postings for archivists that were nearby. And some of the archivists that I did speak to, suggested that I maybe consider being open to traveling, which I wasn't. So I began to shift my focus after that first year, and so then started taking classes and that seemed to align with a lot of positions that I were seeing, which was around primarily the K through 12 librarian or school media specialist roles. Um, and so that's where I thought I was headed. By the time I graduated, I was prepared to be a school media specialist. That summer, I took the praxis for the two exams that are needed for certification. I'd even contacted a few principals at schools I was interested in and was trying to see if maybe I could meet with them. But as I was also preparing my exit strategy, I was still getting, job postings and still occasionally peeking at job ads to see what other positions were out there and what qualifications they were asking for. And then I came across what seemed to me at the time a perfect job ad. It was for an academic librarian position, and it seemed to really appeal to me. But I'll talk about that ad shortly, but before I do want to point out that while I was in my master's program, I actually did not take any courses specific to academic librarianship. And so the job ad itself was perfect. It was part of this Emerging Pathways in Academic Librarianship program that's coordinated by the Association of College and Research Libraries. The position was called the Strategic Initiatives Librarian / Diversity Resident. And everything about it really spoke to some of the anxieties that I was feeling. It was geared toward recent MLIS graduates that had either little to no experience in academic librarianship. That was me. And it was intended to help the librarian develop the skills that they would need to pursue and actually, excel in academic librarianship. And so they crafted the residency around 3 mentored experiences over the course of 2 years. And so I applied and was ultimately hired. Just some brief takeaways from this, hopefully not too rambling story about my MLIS journey. Um, again, there's no cookie cutter approach to any professional journey, but here's some things that you should keep in mind. One, everyone's journey is unique. We all know the reasons that bring us to the program. We are also all grappling with different factors as we think about our next positions, and all of that's okay. As we do all this, it's also okay to factor into our professional decisions what our personal needs and desires are. I know for some of us, this is probably a no-brainer, but for me, I struggle with work-life balance. This was really hard for me to digest at the time, as was this next point, which is that your professional plans and preferences can change, and that's totally okay. Um, I'm not an archivist currently. I do still have that desire to, do something in that space. And so I collaborate with archives and special collections when I can and where it makes sense in some of the projects that I do. Um, but I had to, as I was recognizing what was important to me, I did have to think outside of the box and open myself up to more opportunities. And then lastly, the courses that you take in your MLIS program they do not have to dictate the positions you pursue. They can help, um, but you're actually able to go on a totally different track if you want to. Sometimes you might have to think a bit outside of the box to see how some courses apply to others, but it's easy enough to recalibrate if you're willing. So I said that Gina and I, or we said that we are early career librarians, but what does that really mean? It's interesting. I think we both actually might have had a different definition for early career librarian before I found the information for this slide. It kind of varies by institution. I saw a huge range of what that could be, but typically they're between 0 to 10 years experience. Most often, yeah, we both thought it was 5 years. Most often it's about 6. This breakdown comes from the Association of College and Research Libraries. They offer scholarships to different conferences that they host. And so for the eligibility, they outline, how you fall, what stage of the librarian experience you fall into. And so they say for early career, it's less than 6 years, mid-career is 6 to 15, and then to call yourself a career or established librarian, that's about 15 years. But again, this is the ACRL's definition. As you're looking for different opportunities, you'll see other ranges. I'm going to talk shortly about about the postmaster's residencies and fellowships, and they capped it, I believe, at about between 4 or 5 years experience typically. And so what are residencies or fellowships? I actually think these are really great. I never heard about them while I was in my master's program, but I think they're awesome, and I kind of wish I had known more about them. I looked into one, just happened across the ad, but I do know some librarians who intentionally, looked at and searched for residencies and fellowships for their first position. These are opportunities that are geared specifically for early careers librarians. They want to help librarians gain the confidence and the practical skills they'll need in academic or research libraries. They typically provide the librarian with a position that lasts about 1 to 3 years, and they have a variety of structures. So some allow the librarian to rotate through various departments within the library. Say, for example, spending maybe 6 months in reference, 6 months in cataloging, 6 months in archives, and 6 in public service. So that way, by the end of the residency, the librarian has a sense of which departments appeal more to them than others. But others are, structured around maybe accomplishing a specific goal or project. And so you're maybe housed in one department, but at the end you have a portfolio that speaks to the work that you were doing. 2 of the longest residencies are both the Library of Congress and the National Library of Medicine. Both are believed to have started in the 1950s. Their programs have transformed over the years, but they remain committed to training this next generation of librarians and information professionals. And in January, I think January of next year is when the applications will open again for next year's residencies. The Library of Congress is at least this last iteration was a 6-month appointment, and the National Library of Medicine was 1 year. In the 80s, the library and information science professionals also began crafting diversity residencies. These are positions that are focused intentionally on the recruitment and retention of underrepresented librarians. And just like with other residencies, there are different structures and also varying degrees of success. So in 2017, the ACRL established a diversity alliance. So this is a group of, it initially was deans and now it's program coordinators at different academic librarians around the country. They come together, they've talked about the programs they've created. They also offer to each other and have developed guidelines and recommendations on best practices for residencies. The ACRL has also created for potential current and former residents a group called the Residency Interest Group. In addition to sharing postings of where residencies are hosted, they also offer webinars, professional networking opportunities, and just a chance to get to know each other. So as you consider, your life after the master's, you might want to consider looking into residencies. My first role at the University of Louisville was a diversity residency. It was intended to be 2 years with an optional third. I didn't rotate around the libraries. Instead, I was housed in reference and instruction. And like I said, I had the 3 mentored experiences. One was around library research initiatives. One was around the library's business and entrepreneurship services, and then one was around student success. And throughout my residency experience, my supervisor, who's also more like a mentor, encouraged me that should a position, become available within university libraries, and if I were interested in, staying at U of L, for me to certainly pursue it and not wait until the end of my residency, because everyone, they couldn't promise a permanent role if one wasn't available. So if an opportunity came, he told me to jump on it. And this past spring, long story short, a position did open up or was created in part based on the work that I was doing with my residencies. It was called the Strategic Research Initiatives Librarian. I applied and was accepted, and then I started in this new role in July, thus concluding my residency about 6 months early. So what is a Strategic Research Initiatives Librarian? Well, I am housed under reference, or we call it at U of L, Research Assistance and Instruction in our Ekstrom library. And like I said, many of the duties that I'm working on are kind of extensions of responsibilities from my residency. The biggest thing is, I guess, this continuing to build upon the work that I was doing with one of my mentors, Letitia Reynolds, which was the launch of our new scholar services. It started last fall. It's a suite of signature services that are meant to establish a more collaborative and embedded relationship among U of L's Belknap researchers and librarians. There's 4 primary services. The 2 that I have the most active role on now are the Jumpstart Advanced Literature Searches. This is a service where we provide faculty and graduate students with up to 20 articles, preliminary articles related to their research topic, and we kind of give them some tips and suggestions on, where they might want to search for further research. And then also evidence synthesis or systematic reviews. Those are more comprehensive projects than the common literature search. They're intended to find all of the existing research on a topic in a systematic way, and then analyzing those results. And they can be pretty time consuming. I think Gina might also cover them a bit in her slide too, because it's really big in the health sciences. Our librarian level of support also ranges from the consultation just at the beginning to helping the researchers develop or review a search string to co-authoring the research paper or project. Additionally, I see Gina, I can ramble for an hour. So yes, it's easy enough to go into the weeds with those. Additionally, I am an assistant professor, and so I provide library and information literacy instruction for courses that are within the College of Ed. That's my liaison area. And in reference, that is a typical responsibility for any librarian that's there. We all have different units or colleges that we help or we liaise with. Again, I work with the College of Ed, so I'm helping faculty determine what resources are most appropriate for their courses. And then I'm also, arranging sessions where I come in or they come to the library. I show them those resources and kind of take them through maybe steps they would have for an assignment. But I also meet with both faculty and students one-on-one to help with more specific research needs. So sometimes faculty are preparing presentations for a conference or their own research project, and I help them. It's a little different than the Jumpstart Advanced Literature Searches, although it can be similar too, but it's just more personal one-on-one. And students might also need that one-on-one support with assignments. I try to keep the College of Ed informed of new resources and services that are offered by the library, from relevant trial databases, micro courses, or if we're doing any programming or webinars that might tie into some of the work that they're doing. And then I also work with my colleagues to develop programs, activities, and projects. for the library that facilitate research engagement with our resources. Gina and I actually collaborated this past spring for a reading and resource series where we tied in PubMed, the database PubMed, with a book that we were kind of doing. It was almost like a community read book, Her Body and Other Parties. Lastly, as I mentioned, this position is tenure track, which means that in addition to all of this, I do have an obligation to publish and present my research and scholarship um, yeah, out there within a certain amount of time. I'm also expected to provide service. This usually means serving on a campus, local, or national committee for an organization related to librarianship. So that sounds like a lot. Uh, and I guess if I could maybe synthesize some takeaways from my experience, I've come up with 4 tips that I think would be key as you think about at least your first 3 years in librarianship. And of course, I'm an academic librarian, so it's coming from that lens, but I think all of these tips can be adapted to any type of librarian position that you go into. First and foremost, I recommend looking for opportunities that are geared toward early career librarians. I spoke extensively about the residency or fellowship positions, but even if you opt for another position, there's still lots of professional development opportunities too, from leadership programs and institutes to scholarships for conferences and webinars that offer career support. So if you're ever unsure of where to start or how to find them, you can always at least start with the American Library Association's website. Another thing that I recommend is to request support from your institution. Some colleges or institutions are really great at offering funding that cover like conference registrations or travel. Others are not. But even if they are, I think it doesn't hurt to still ask for some additional support. You can even maybe try to incorporate that into part of your compensation negotiations. And you could use the argument that, you're still an early career librarian, you're entry level, you're hoping to gain more experience. And at the very least, they can say no, but they've already made the offer. So you know that they're at least interested in you. They're not going to take it off the table because you asked for this. Thirdly, find a mentor. Some institutions, U of L does at least, kind of builds that into your onboarding process where we were paired with another librarian in a different department for the first 6 months. But you can also find mentors from certain professional organizations or associations, or even college professors that have really resonated with you, or you like their career trajectory. I do recommend finding at least one in the library and information science space. And I think a great mentor should be someone who's able to help you establish, refine, and achieve your career goals. You can check in with them as regularly as both of you feel comfortable with. But just having that person who can, hear some of your ideas and also share their experience is always helpful. Lastly, I encourage you to get involved with an organization that resonates with your goals. There are so many library-related organizations, and there's so much to know about this field. So it can be overwhelming. But even if you're not required to, do some service because you're on the tenure track or whatever, I would still recommend finding at least one, but maybe more if it's possible, that's related to, either the area of librarianship that you're interested in or are currently employed in, or where you think you're headed long term. I think this is a great way to stay up to date, on developments in your field and to meet more people. And so this was a quick overview about my experience. We will take questions in the end, but then I will transfer it over to Gina, who will share a bit of her journey.
Hello, so as mentioned, my name is Gina Genova. So I have been a librarian for a couple years longer than Courtney. Oh yeah, the transitions. Okay, great. I know Courtney is driving and we probably should have done more run-throughs than we did. But I received a Master's of Science and Information from the University of Michigan in the spring of 2020. That is an ALA accredited degree. They just do things, they have to be different. For spring of 2020 was not a great time to be searching for a job. That was the first few months of COVID lockdowns. A lot of postings that were available just disappeared. However, I was lucky enough to start a tenure track faculty position as a clinical librarian at the University of Louisville in November of that year. And then I do want to note, similar to Courtney, my plan shifted a little bit over graduate school. I did not originally plan to be a health sciences librarian when I entered library school simply because I did not know that that was an option or a field that existed. I discovered it while I was in library school at a part-time campus job. But even then, I was not 100% dead set on that path, especially, early on with limited job postings. I was also applying to more general, like liaison and information literacy oriented positions, but I'm definitely happy I ended up here. Um, so now we'll look into what exactly is a clinical librarian, and the answer is what exactly that is will depend on the institution and on the particular position. The balance of academic versus clinical activities is a little different even among members on my team. You will have some positions based at hospitals that are almost all clinical. And then, but I have a pretty good mix. So on the academic side, I will do library orientations, like new medical students, new residents. So those are trainee doctors. They have their medical degree, but they don't practice independently yet. I will also do things like instruction for EndNote and literature searching, as well as research consultations with students and faculty, like for their projects. And on the more clinical side of library services, I will actually attend meetings with physicians and other providers and provide point of need reference services and things like case conference, morbidity and mortality meetings, and grand rounds. That is basically when all the doctors get in a room and just talk about something that's relevant to their practice. And things that can be a little bit of both. I do provide support and collaborate on systematic review projects. That could be several talks unto themselves. However, this is definitely an important service that our library provides. Sometimes it is a fairly academic activity. The faculty are just interested in an area and need a publication. Other times it is a little more clinically relevant. A lot of guidelines that are used in practice will include a systematic review as part of their development to make sure that they're considering all the available evidence. One that I've worked on was used by the Society for Simulation in Healthcare for developing their guidelines for the use of in situ simulation scenarios in health professions education. And then I also do quite a few literature searches. This is probably the single largest share of my time is performing literature searches for faculty and residents. And this can also be academic or clinical, depending on what people are asking for. Sometimes it is for a research project or grant proposal, and sometimes it is a little more immediately clinically relevant. Patient care questions happen, not super common that they need a literature search for that. They usually have different tools that they'll consult for those questions, but I do quite a few searches for quality improvement projects. And I also work on outreach, our small outreach program and marketing, because nobody has just one job in a library. It never works like that. But this is my main thing. All right, so health sciences librarians, this is a field that I did not learn about in library school and I didn't know about before I entered. And I feel like it's a really interesting field. So I will just talk a little more about it. So the first thing is that we go by several titles. So my official title is clinical librarian. You will also see job postings for health sciences librarian, medical librarian, hospital librarian, informationist, and also specific fields like nursing librarian. We also work in many settings. The biggest one is going to be academic institutions. So this would be, universities and colleges. In many cases, they're the ones with medical schools, dental schools, pharmacy schools, all of those professions. However, many smaller universities and colleges that have nursing, public health, and allied health programs, if those programs are large enough, they will also have a dedicated health sciences librarian for those students, even though there may not be like an official medical school there. Also hospitals, and this again runs the gamut of hospitals at a certain size. Essentially, every hospital or hospital system will have at least a small library operation. So this may be a research hospital like St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and it may be a VA hospital or like the Norton Healthcare System over in Louisville. They have a couple librarians. So professional organizations. So not every medical or health sciences professional organization has a staff librarian, but I do know that the American Dental Association has a library. Also, corporations. So biotech and pharmaceutical companies occasionally have libraries. until last month when she started a PhD program. My sister worked for a pharmaceutical company. They had a librarian. And lastly, research institutes. So the big one here is going to be the National Library of Medicine and other institutes at the National Institutes of Health. But there are occasionally positions that pop up at other places. I recently saw a listing for the ECRI Institute hiring a librarian, and they are a nonprofit that works in guideline development. We also have varied academic, clinical, and community-focused duties. So as I mentioned, I have a mix of academic and clinical roles. You will have some of those hospital positions that are very clinically focused. Some of them will even round with the healthcare team and see patients. We do not, most do not. And you'll have some kind of liaison positions that are very academic. It's basically just being an academic librarian, but you work with nursing students. And there are a few positions that are very focused on patients and families. So I know, for example, the MD Anderson Cancer Center has a hospital that is just a patient and family focused library. They have a hospital, of course they do. They have a library that is specifically for patients and families, and they do have a librarian that just works at that library. All right. So my formal health sciences training is not impressive, not much to speak of. I had 1 semester of undergraduate cellular biology. If you go back further, I had a medical terminology class in high school. And also way back in high school, I attended a 2-week-long summer program that was basically like, so you want to be a doctor, talked about, the process for becoming a physician. We got to tour the Dell Medical School, or at least I believe it was Dell. It was one of the ones in Houston. Dell is in Austin. Don't listen to me. Okay, you can hear my wife in the same room correcting me because I can't remember Texas medical schools. But this is typical for health sciences librarians. There are some fields of librarianship where to get into the subject, you do have to have prior training, like law librarians are largely required to have JDs. However, this is a field where very few of us have any formal training or credentials in health sciences. So if this is something that interests you, I strongly encourage you to kind of like seek continued education opportunities and pursue it because very few of us have official backgrounds. It's definitely something that you can still enter. All right, so kind of getting started and learning the basics for a new field of librarianship. So one is while you are still in graduate school, I definitely encourage you to take advantage of experiences there. If there are courses specific to the area of librarianship you want to go into, definitely take those. My school did not have a health sciences librarianship or evidence synthesis or any sort of related courses. That's a different story, but I was able to get some experience with part-time jobs and internships. So I worked in the University of Michigan's Health Sciences Library. They have several health sciences schools. And I also did an internship at the MD Anderson Cancer Center's research library. Those are extremely valuable, both for kind of getting a feel for the field, knowing what it entails if you want it, but also for beefing up your resume or CV for when you're looking for jobs. Also, this one is going to be very specific to health sciences librarianship. Most of the others translate pretty well. This one doesn't, but if you are interested in this field, I have to plug the webinars for the network of the National Library of Medicine, especially their series on PubMed. It is 4 hours. It is a little boring, but we live in PubMed and it is a fantastic resource. Also, journals for your specific area of librarianship. So health sciences librarianship, we have things like the Journal of the Medical Library Association and Medical Reference Services Quarterly. These are very valuable for knowing kind of like what is going on in the field, what people are doing. In many cases, the institution you're at, either for graduate school or working at, will have subscriptions to these journals, and many are also open access. Also, professional organizations that are, not just the American Library Association, but the ones specific to your subfield. Ours is the Medical Library Association. There are ones for law librarians, art librarians, school librarians, and so on. And these are very valuable for forming networks and getting access to resources that are tailored to your specific position and field. Related to that, conferences. These will often be put on by your professional association. So the Medical Library Association conferences definitely are main one. Those are, again, very helpful for keeping up with your field, developing a network of specialists working in your area. But those aren't the only conferences that are really helpful starting out. State and regional conferences can also be very useful. One is that they are a lot less overwhelming. They're much lower pressure in many cases than national level conferences. And the people that you're meeting, even if they don't have your exact same job, they're in your same subfield, they're working in your area, you're going to be running into them professionally, so it's always good to make those connections. And last is coworkers. I was very lucky to have extremely helpful coworkers. They are always a very useful resource, just if you're not sure how to get started on something, or if a patron asks something and you think that they are just you have no idea what they want, or does this even exist? Always good to run that by a coworker. And I will say, of course, conference registration and travel and professional association memberships can be a bit expensive, so you may have to prioritize. But sometimes you are also able to get, Courtney mentioned this too, support from your institution. So they are very valuable. Another tip, again, I'll be using health sciences examples, but this will apply to almost any position, is to get to know your patrons. So one is to understand the cultures of different departments or fields. In a public library, this could be like different sorts of patron constituencies. Of course, in medicine, this is kind of like pediatricians and surgeons, very different people. Another is to learn, especially for academic positions, learn how the training and positions work for the programs and departments that you are serving. So medical training is a very structured, well laid out process, and it's a bit hierarchical at some points. Additionally, I do not work very much with the School of Nursing, but if you were a nursing librarian, there are at least a dozen nursing degrees at all levels, ranging from associate to doctoral. So knowing where your students are, what their goals are, will really help you communicate with them, provide them the services they need. Another is to familiarize yourself with the lingo. If you're working in any sort of academic or specialized position, people are going to use terms that are not necessarily everyday language. Don't be embarrassed to just quietly Google something. It will happen. And the last one is to try to avoid imposter syndrome. So, especially working with primarily physicians, these are all very smart, accomplished people. Many, if not most of them, have saved somebody's life at some point. However, it is important to remember that you have a valuable skill set. Nobody knows everything or does everything particularly skillfully. And whether your specialization is database searching or information literacy, that is a valuable niche that you fill and that you can contribute. And just trying to remember that and avoid feeling, like I don't know what I'm doing here I think is important. I will also finish up for some tips on scholarly activity. So, like Courtney, I am a tenure track librarian, and I think for people who, did not do a lot of research in undergrad or did not work somewhere else in academia before this can feel very overwhelming. So here's some tips getting started. One is to just ask around the library. A lot of times your coworkers will have a project going on or will be thinking about starting a project, and they will be happy to bring someone on to help and make it happen. Another is to submit to conferences. So I know submitting to national conferences can be scary, but it is totally possible, especially if you're submitting something like a poster, to get accepted. Um, it won't be 100%, but your odds are actually pretty good. And especially with those state and regional conferences, they have very high acceptance rates. Even if you don't think you have anything super exciting, if you have preliminary data on a research project you're working on, or if you completed and put on an interesting program or reworked a program in a unique way, that can totally be a poster or a lightning talk somewhere. And it might not be the most exciting thing in the world, but you'll still get to meet some people and get a line on your CV. Another is don't be afraid to overhaul or abandon stuck projects. I think this can be really hard to do after you put work into something. So my first stab at a research project, I had IRB approval for it and everything. It was a survey study, and we tried several distribution mechanisms, and we literally got 0 responses. None. So kind of got to the point where there wasn't really any other ways we could think to kind of like get this out to the faculty. This was definitely something where beforehand I probably should have done a little more poking around to see if preprint literature was of interest to our faculty. I think the problem was they are just not. However, I was able to move on from that and start a different research project, and that was actually published as a full article earlier this summer. So definitely move on if something is not working. Others too, with the caveat of try not to burn yourself out. You definitely can say no if you have to, but if you can, try to say yes when people ask you to work on projects or help out with initiatives. In many cases, these do lead, if not to full article publications, then to conference presentations, and you'll be making connections around your library. People will bring you on to things that they're working on. So even if something is a little bit outside of your wheelhouse and what you normally work on, if you do have the bandwidth to take it on, it's a good idea to say yes. Another is try not to be intimidated by the IRB, it's the Institutional Review Boards on Human Subjects Research, and that includes things like surveys and focus groups. You will have to go through the IRB to make sure that it is ethically and legally sound. And it can sound scary, it's very official. However, just submit it, just get it through. Most institutions will offer templates for protocols, FAQs, things like that. So, and if you are missing something or something's not quite right, the IRB will not throw your project in the trash. They will just send back revisions. You can make them. It's a little bit long and tedious, but it'll be okay. Try not to be scared of them. They are much more worried about medical research than they are librarian research. Most of the time, as soon as you get the forms in the correct format, they will declare your study exempt. And the other one, final one, is definitely most relevant to health sciences librarianship, but it is becoming more common in other fields, like as Courtney mentioned, the social sciences, but is to learn how to do systematic reviews. They are not fun. They are time consuming. I have yet to have a team complete one in, I think, less than a year. I tell them less than 6 months during consultations so they don't panic. Yeah. However, if you are a full collaborator on it, if you are writing the search strategy and creating that part of the method section, you will be an author, and that will count as a publication. So those, even though they are not usually a very fun part of your job, they can be very valuable for your scholarly record. And that is all I have.
Thank you so much, Gina and Courtney. Does anyone have any questions? Zoe, do you have a question or are you clapping?
No, I'm just clapping.
Just wanted to make sure. Y'all, I know they did a great job, but no follow-up questions? Is there anything, Courtney, I'll ask you after Gina has now presented that you're like, oh, wait, I wish I would have said this as well, but I hadn't or didn't have the chance or it just escaped my mind?
I think all of her tips, especially the pointers of, saying yes when you can, asking your coworkers for, what they're working on or projects, because my first year there were those mentored experiences, but there were also opportunities that did come from just figuring out what other people were doing and seeing how I could be involved and take part.
How often do you all communicate with your mentors?
Well, for me, I have a few. I mentioned one idea for a mentor is like if there's a faculty member during your MLIS program that really resonates. And there was one for me. And so we touch base maybe once a semester. And he's also asked me to present to his classes since then. He gave me one of my first opportunities to publish, which I appreciated. I have a mentor within U of L. We meet once a month. And that works out pretty well too.
So for me, informally, my supervisor has been a very strong mentor. So this is something that if you're in a more niche area of librarianship, you might run into is that people in other departments or other libraries on campus may not always quite know exactly what you're doing. So that is definitely something that we've run into at Kornhauser with kind of like the almost like odd type of work we do. So we talk at least weekly, just like about what's going on around the library. A lot of it is kind of like just logistical and procedural, but we'll also talk more about like brainstorming research projects, other things that are coming up. The official U of L mentor project, they can definitely be hit or miss. Mine kind of fell off. So I haven't spoken to him in a while. But it ended up being okay.
I'm seeing we're getting some questions in the comment box.
So for job postings, I did a little bit of everything. And part of this was that I was COVID searching. I do not recommend that to anybody. But the ALA job board is nice. Also, the job boards of any state library associations, or it's kind of like sub-professional library associations, like the Medical Library Association would be ours, that you're interested in. So I was looking, yeah, at ALA, I think Special and Medical Library Association, several states that I was willing to move to. And Indeed too is, you're gonna get more false positives you have to scroll through. But if you just Google like library or library, not Google, Indeed, their search bar library, librarian, and like the city you're interested in. There was actually a museum librarian position that popped up in there for me that was not in any of the library specific job boards. So that's what I used. It was a big mix of them.
Yeah, and I am pretty sure I did all of those. And then since I initially thought I was going into archives, I know I was on some listservs like Clear, CLIR. They have a job posting. I actually forget what the acronym stands for, but they're doing something in the archival space. And so we're just still receiving ads from them.
Yeah, a lot of listservs will also include job postings from time to time. Not necessarily a super reliable tool because they tend to get mixed in with everything, but if they're relevant to what you're interested in anyway, good to check them for that.
And then I see the next question is about residencies. Are they easier to enter into for new grads, or are these as competitive as entry-level positions? I think it really depends on which institution that's offering it that you apply to. Um, and they can be competitive. I know, for example, some residents, they actually only looked at residencies or fellowships, and there was a pool of them that were doing it. They were willing to relocate, they were looking across the country, and they were all looking at the same time generally. So that also impacted them. Um, but on the other hand, they could also be easier in that some of the positions, there's not, at least for me when I was searching, I actually did not see a lot of positions that were geared toward early career. But again, this was 2022, and I was only looking in the Louisville area, not looking nationally during my search.
Young, do you have a question? I think you're muted.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so Courtney, you just mentioned that you didn't have any previous experience in during your job application process. So how did you approach when you applied the position? And also because your coursework toward to the archival work and the school librarianship, and you said that you didn't take any course related academic library setting. So how would you transfer your skill and knowledge learned in the coursework into your job setting during your interview process?
That's a really great question. And while I did not have experience in an academic library, I did have experience with a digital archive. I had at that time almost 6 years experience. And so I also pulled heavily from those experiences. And I tried to, though I wasn't applying for an archival position, I think there's still elements of information seeking that's applicable to the academic space. I remember as part of I will also say I was not prepared for this. I did not realize that when you're applying for academic positions, it's a day-long process that also includes a 30-minute presentation. And so I also gave that. I was prepared for that. But the digital archive that I worked for also had a database, which is also translatable for academic research. So I think, or I know I included a demonstration of that database and how I would assist, anyone who's accessing the digital archive, show them through how to use it, pointing out features, things like that. So I tried to just relate what experience I did have and some of the courses that I had taken into questions that they were asking. Another great benefit, at least for this experience, but I think a lot of, well, I don't know. I feel at least anecdotally from what I've heard from other people who've interviewed, that companies seem to be more willing to share questions in advance. And so that also gives you the opportunity to prepare.
Thank you.
Gina and Courtney, if anyone maybe thinks of a question after or is a little shy right now, is there a best way to contact both of you? Is it email? Is it LinkedIn? What is your preferred method?
I think definitely email.
I was going to say the
I would
same.
not recommend trying to contact me through LinkedIn. It's I will probably only pay attention to it again if I need to find a new job. We'll put those in the chat.
Courtney, it's the same for you. Also email.
Yes, if you are, I mean, I try to stay engaged with LinkedIn, but sometimes it could be several weeks. So if you're looking for a prompter response, email is always ideal.
No, perfect.
Can I ask you another question? I'm sorry, I ask a multiple question. So if you looking back to your MS or MLS degree, if you want to go back to the program, what would you do differently than after you having a job and experiencing all the librarianship? What you think that you could do, taking some courses, or what kind of activity you wanna kind of invest during your MLS program?
I think that's a really great question. I'm trying to think on it, and at least my initial response is that while while the courses are helpful, a lot of the knowledge comes from the practical experience of the position. And so I'm not really sure if adding courses or taking different courses might have changed anything or given me a better experience.
Yeah, so I will second that the practical experience is by far the most valuable. So throughout my program, I had not all at the same time, 2 internships, 2 part-time jobs, no, 3 part-time jobs on campus, and a research fellowship with the librarians. The University of Michigan libraries had like there were 3 groups. It was librarians working on research projects, and they specifically brought in grad students to work at it as a fellowship, which was extremely valuable for the scholarly activity part of my job. And those were all more applicable to my work than any course I took. Also, this sounds so negative. There were just not a lot of libraries focused courses offered in my program. It was very much focused kind of like on the user experience, human computer interaction portion of information science. So there wouldn't be much I would add. And I was happen to be happy with the positions I had, but I would definitely, regardless of what courses your school does offer, even if you have a fantastic catalog, they can provide a very good foundation, but whatever kind of real world experience you are able to get while you're in school I have definitely found that more valuable.
Thank you both. Any other questions, y'all? Okay, I'm going to give one more virtual round of applause to both of you. I'm excited. It was a great kickoff to our webinar series for this fall semester. Don't forget to grab their emails just in case y'all have any questions. If for some reason you missed their emails, I'm more than happy to also share it as well. Thank you all.